For 7 years I paid for my sister's medical degree. The day she graduated, she served me with legal papers over our grandfather's inheritance. And in court, when the judge asked why she'd sue the person who'd sacrificed everything for her, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your only job is to sacrifice. That's your place in this family." Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. I never imagined my sister would look at me the way she did that morning. Like I was nothing more than an inconvenience standing between her and what she believed she deserved. The courtroom was quiet in that artificial way, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Wooden benches. Pale walls. A judge seated above us, unreadable. My sister sat across the aisle, spine straight, chin lifted, dressed in a tailored navy suit that still smelled new. She looked exactly like what she had just become. A doctor. Confident. Respected. Untouchable. I should have felt proud. Instead I felt hollow. "Your Honor," her lawyer began smoothly, "my client sacrificed years of her life in medical school. She had no financial support except what she managed herself. The inheritance left by her grandfather should rightfully belong to her." I clenched my hands in my lap. No financial support. My sister didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. She knew I was listening. 7 years. 7 years of tuition payments, rent transfers, late-night phone calls when she was overwhelmed. 7 years of me working overtime, postponing my own plans, telling myself family comes first. Her lawyer continued, "The defendant chose, voluntarily, to help. There was no agreement. No obligation." That's when my sister finally turned toward me. Her eyes were cold. Calculated. She leaned forward slightly and spoke directly, her voice clear enough to echo in the courtroom. My sibling was never promised anything. Their role was simple. Support me. Sacrifice. That's what they were good at. A murmur rippled through the room. "Your only job," she added without hesitation, "was to sacrifice. That's your place in this family." The words landed harder than any slap ever could. I felt dozens of eyes shift toward me, waiting for a reaction. For tears. For anger. For me to finally break. I didn't. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something terrifyingly simple. He truly believed this. That I existed to make her life easier. That my effort had no value. That once she crossed the finish line, I was disposable. The judge cleared his throat, restoring order. "Let's proceed." My sister sat back, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She thought she had already won. Thought this was just a formality. That's when I stood. Not dramatically. Not angrily. I reached into my bag and removed a single cream-colored envelope. No labels. No markings. Just paper heavy with truth. I walked forward and placed it gently on the clerk's desk. "Your Honor," I said calmly, my voice steady despite everything, "before you decide anything, I'd like you to see this." The judge picked up the envelope. My sister's smile faltered. And for the first time that morning, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Before I became the person sitting in that courtroom quietly watching my sister try to erase me, I was simply the reliable one. The older sibling. The steady one. The one everyone leaned on without ever asking if I was tired. In our family, roles were assigned early even if no one ever said them out loud. My sister was the dreamer. The brilliant one with potential everyone loved to talk about. I was the support system. The background noise. The one who would figure it out. Whenever something went wrong, eyes turned to me. I learned young that being dependable meant being invisible. If my sister struggled in school, it was assumed I would help. If money was tight, it was understood I would manage. When our parents argued about bills or responsibilities, I was the quiet mediator, the one who made things smoother so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. "You're strong," they always told me. "You don't need help. You understand how things work." At first, those words felt like compliments. Later, I realized they were expectations disguised as praise. While my sister chased ambitions, I learned discipline. While she was encouraged to dream big, I was encouraged to be practical. I chose stable work. I saved carefully. I postponed things I wanted because there was always something, or someone, more important. And I didn't resent it. Not then. I told myself that families function because someone is willing to carry more weight. I told myself sacrifice was temporary. That someday when things settled I would finally get my turn. I believed that love was proven through endurance. My sister and I were never enemies growing up. We laughed together, shared secrets. She cried on my shoulder when things overwhelmed her. She called me first whenever she needed reassurance, advice, or help fixing a problem she didn't want to face alone. And every time she called I answered. Because that was who I was. The dependable one. The problem solver. The person who stayed steady so others could soar. I didn't realize how one-sided that balance had become until much later. Didn't notice how gratitude slowly turned into entitlement. How appreciation quietly faded into assumption. By the time my sister announced she wanted to become a doctor, the decision didn't even feel like a question. Everyone looked at me. Not because I was asked, but because it was understood. And without hesitation, without conditions, without asking what it would cost me in the long run, I nodded. Of course, I said. Because that's what I had always done. What I didn't know then was that this quiet, unquestioning version of myself, the one who never demanded recognition, was the version my sister believed would never stand up. He thought I would always stay in my place. He was wrong. The promise wasn't made in a courtroom or written on paper. It was made in a quiet hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fading time. Our grandfather lay propped against white pillows, thinner than I remembered, his once commanding presence reduced to labored breaths and tired eyes. Machines hummed softly around him, marking seconds we all pretended we still had plenty of. My sister stood at the foot of the bed, hands clenched, eyes shining with determination. She had just been accepted into medical school. It was all anyone could talk about. "I'll make you proud," she told him. "I promise. I'll become a doctor." Our grandfather smiled faintly, pride softening his worn face. He had always believed in her brilliance. Always spoken of her future as if it were already written. Then his gaze shifted to me. "You'll look after her," he said gently. Not a request. A statement. The kind that comes wrapped in trust and expectation. I nodded without thinking. Of course I would. Later that evening, after visiting hours ended, we gathered in the hallway. My sister, a few relatives, hushed voices bouncing off sterile walls. That's when the unspoken became spoken. Medical school was expensive. Scholarships would help, but not enough. Loans would bury her before she even started her career. The family murmured concerns, sympathy, admiration, but no solutions. Then all eyes turned to me. "You're good with money," someone said. "You're established," another added. "You don't have kids. You can manage." My sister didn't ask directly. She didn't need to. She just looked at me with the same expression she always had when she needed something. Hopeful, trusting, already certain of the answer. "I'll help," I said. "No contracts. No conditions. No timelines. Just family." We talked about our grandfather's estate briefly, vaguely. Nothing concrete. Just reassurances. Everything will be fair someday. We'll sort it out later. Promises spoken easily because no one thought they'd ever be tested. My sister squeezed my hand. "I won't forget this," she said. "I swear." I believed her. I believed that shared blood meant shared values. That sacrifice would be remembered. That love would eventually balance the scales. That night, driving home alone, I told myself this was temporary. 7 years, maybe less. After that, she'd be a doctor. She'd stand on her own feet. And I'd finally focus on my life. I didn't see it as giving something up. I saw it as investing. In family, in loyalty, in the idea that doing the right thing always comes back around. I had no idea that this promise, made in a hospital hallway under fluorescent lights, would one day be used as evidence against me. Or that the same words meant to unite us would become the foundation of her betrayal. 7 years doesn't sound long until you measure it in what you give up. It began with tuition payments. Large, precise numbers that left my account every semester like clockwork. Then came the extras. Housing deposits. Exam fees. Lab equipment. Books so expensive they felt like investments instead of paper. I adjusted my life around those transfers without ever announcing it. I took extra shifts. Declined vacations. Learned to say maybe next year, so often it became automatic. While my sister studied anatomy and pathology, I memorized budget spreadsheets and interest rates, quietly making the math work. She called often in the early years. Late nights. Tearful breakdowns before exams. doubts about whether she was strong enough to make it. I listened through exhaustion, reassuring her, reminding her why she started. Every time she hung up calmer, I felt like I'd done something meaningful. But slowly the tone changed. Gratitude faded into expectation. Calls became shorter. Updates became rarer. She stopped asking if the timing was okay before sending me her expenses. They simply appeared, itemized, assumed, unquestioned. When I hesitated once, just once, she laughed it off. "You're better with money than I am," she said. "You'll figure it out." And I did. Always did. While she moved into nicer apartments closer to campus, I stayed where I was. While she traveled for conferences, I stayed behind, watching photos of her success scroll across my phone like proof that it was all worth it. Family praised her relentlessly. "She's going to change lives. She'll take care of everyone someday. She's the future." No one asked how I was managing. They didn't see the nights I lay awake calculating how long I could keep going. The opportunities one quietly passed on because stability mattered more than ambition. The version of myself that kept shrinking to make room for her growth. Still, I told myself this was temporary. 7 years would end. Sacrifice had a finish line. But something else ended too, something subtle. She stopped saying thank you. By her 4th year, support wasn't a favor anymore. It was assumed. By her final year, it was expected. When I mentioned being tired, she brushed it off. "This is just how families work," she said. "We help the ones who matter." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it hurt, but because it clarified something I hadn't wanted to see. In her mind, my value was conditional. Useful as long as I was giving. Replaceable once I stopped. By the time she graduated, dressed in her white coat, applauded by everyone who mattered, I stood in the crowd clapping too. Smiling, proud, and completely unaware that she had already decided our arrangement was finished. And that everything I'd given her was about to be rewritten as nothing at all. Graduation day arrived wrapped in celebration and noise. Cameras flashing, families laughing, names echoing across the auditorium as futures were announced one by one. When my sister's name was called, the room erupted. She walked across the stage with confidence, shoulders back, smile practiced and bright. The white coat fit her perfectly, as if it had always belonged to her. I stood with everyone else, applauding until my palms stung, pride rising in my chest despite everything it had cost to get her there. She had made it. 7 years of sacrifice, hers and mine, had reached their conclusion. After the ceremony, we gathered for dinner. A reservation at an elegant restaurant she chose herself. Linen tablecloths. Soft lighting. The kind of place where success felt permanent. She arrived late, surrounded by classmates and compliments, already slipping into her new identity. People called her Doctor. Each time she smiled a little wider. At first nothing seemed wrong. Then I noticed the shift. She didn't sit beside me like she always had. She barely looked at me when I spoke. When the waiter asked about the bill, she glanced in my direction out of habit, then caught herself. "I've got it," she said quickly, almost defensively. "I can afford it now." The words shouldn't have stung. But they did. Throughout the evening, her stories changed. They weren't about surviving medical school anymore. They were about what came next. New opportunities, new circles, new standards. "I've worked too hard to go backward," she said at one point, sipping her drink. "I deserve more now." More than what? She spoke about our grandfather briefly, casually, as if his memory was already settling into the past. When inheritance came up, only in passing, her tone sharpened. "Things should finally be fair," she said, meeting my eyes for the first time that night. "Fair." I smiled, nodding, trying to convince myself I was imagining the tension. That exhaustion was distorting my perspective. That this was just nerves, just excitement. But something felt off. When the dinner ended, she hugged everyone goodbye, quick, efficient embraces. When she reached me, her hug was brief. Distant. "Everything changes now," she said softly. "I hope you understand." I told myself she meant her career. Her schedule. Her responsibilities. I didn't realize she meant our relationship. As I watched her walk away that night, confident, accomplished, untethered, I felt a quiet unease settle in my chest. A sense that something had shifted permanently, though I couldn't yet name it. I had spent years preparing her for the future. What I hadn't prepared for was the moment she decided that future no longer included me. My grandfather passed away 2 weeks after the graduation. The call came early in the morning, the kind of call you recognize before you even answer. His voice had been fading for months, his body quietly surrendering, but the finality still knocked the air from my lungs. The funeral was dignified and subdued. Stories were shared. Memories softened the grief. My sister stood tall beside the casket, composed, receiving condolences like someone already accustomed to public attention. I stayed slightly behind her as I always had. A few days later, the family gathered for the will reading. Nothing dramatic. No raised voices. Just a small office, stiff chairs, and a lawyer who spoke carefully as if every word carried weight. At first, everything sounded reasonable. Assets divided. Accounts listed. Personal items assigned. My sister nodded confidently, already anticipating her share. I listened quietly, waiting for clarity. Then came the pause. The remainder of the estate, the lawyer continued, will be distributed equally between both grandchildren. Equally. The word echoed in the room. My sister's expression changed instantly. The confidence drained, replaced by something sharper. Calculation. She shifted in her chair, lips pressing together. That doesn't make sense, she said. I was the one he was proud of. He said I'd carry on his legacy. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Your grandfather was very clear. He valued fairness. Fairness. Later that evening, my sister confronted me. You don't need this, she said bluntly. You're already established. I'm just starting out. I reminded her gently of the years I had supported her. Of the promise we all made. Of the understanding that sacrifice would be acknowledged. Her expression hardened. You chose to help, she replied. That doesn't entitle you to anything. The words landed with chilling clarity. Within days, her tone shifted from dismissive to aggressive. Conversations became arguments. Text messages turned cold and formal. She began speaking in careful phrases as if rehearsing. Then the paperwork arrived. Legal documents. Official seals. My name printed beneath hers. He was contesting the will. Claiming undue influence. Claiming the estate should reflect true contribution. Claiming I had no right to what was left. I sat alone at my kitchen table, documents spread before me, reading the same sentences over and over until they lost meaning. 7 years of support rewritten as charity. 7 years of sacrifice reframed as irrelevance. The lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was about erasing my role entirely. That's when I understood something crucial. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't grief. This was planned. And in that moment, staring at legal language designed to reduce me to nothing, I realized my sister wasn't just taking me to court. He was trying to rewrite history. What she didn't know was that I remembered every detail. And I had proof. The lawsuit didn't arrive with drama. It came quietly, slipped into my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, folded neatly inside an official envelope that felt heavier than it should have. I stood in my doorway long after the mail carrier had gone, staring at my name typed in bold letters, my sister's name printed beneath it as the plaintiff. Seeing it in ink made it real. She wasn't threatening anymore. She wasn't arguing. She was attacking. The complaint was written in cold, professional language, but every sentence felt personal. It painted a version of our lives that barely resembled the truth. According to the filing, my support had been voluntary. A generous choice. An act of goodwill with no expectation attached. 7 years reduced to a favor. She claimed she had struggled alone. That I had merely assisted when convenient. That our grandfather had been misled into believing I deserved anything at all. Reading it felt like watching someone dismantle my life with legal precision. What hurt most wasn't the accusations. It was the certainty behind them. She believed this narrative. Or at least she believed it was convincing enough to win. Family members started calling within days. Some cautiously. Some firmly. All with the same message disguised in different words. Do you really want to fight your own sister? This is just money. She's worked so hard. Be the bigger person. No one asked how it felt to be sued by someone you had supported for nearly a decade. No one questioned the morality of her actions. They just wanted the discomfort to end. I listened. I nodded. I said very little. My sister, meanwhile, stopped speaking to me entirely, except through her lawyer. Every message arrived stripped of emotion, filtered through legal jargon meant to intimidate. She requested documents. Financial records. Proof. Proof that I existed. I could have panicked. I could have confronted her. I could have begged for mediation. I did none of that. Instead, I sat down and started organizing. Every transfer. Every receipt. Every message that began with, "Can you help me with?" Every promise spoken casually but remembered clearly. She thought I had given blindly. She thought I had trusted without tracking. What she never considered was that the same discipline that allowed me to support her for 7 years had also taught me to keep records. Detailed ones. As the court date was set, I felt something unexpected replace the hurt. Clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding to fix. This was a truth to reveal. And for the first time since the papers arrived, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. If my sister wanted to turn our history into a legal argument, I would let the facts speak. Quietly. Precisely. And all at once. What my sister never understood about me was this. I don't move quickly when I'm emotional. I move slowly. Carefully. With intention. While she was building a case around entitlement, I was revisiting 7 years of reality. Not through memory but through evidence. Numbers don't lie, and I had spent my entire adult life making sure they didn't drift unnoticed. I didn't start with confrontation. I started with folders. Bank statements arranged by year. Tuition invoices highlighted. Rent transfers labeled with notes she herself had written. "Just until next semester. I'll pay you back once I'm settled." Text messages she had forgotten, sent in moments of panic and exhaustion, now quietly waiting to be read again. I wasn't angry as I reviewed them. I was focused. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney, not a family friend, not someone recommended by relatives. A professional who specialized in inheritance disputes and financial contribution claims. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not extended family. Not even friends. I listened. I asked questions. I answered honestly. When I finished explaining everything, the attorney leaned back and said something that shifted the ground beneath me. "This isn't charity," he said. "This is structured support with reasonable expectation." Expectation. A word my sister insisted didn't apply. We discussed options. Not retaliation. Protection. The difference mattered to me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth recognized. Over the next few weeks, I reconstructed the timeline. Every payment aligned with an academic year. Every large transfer followed by messages acknowledging reliance. Patterns emerged. Clear, consistent, undeniable. I also found something else. An email my grandfather had sent me shortly before he passed. At the time it felt sentimental. A message thanking me for holding everything together, and reminding me that fairness mattered more than appearances. I had saved it without thinking. Now it mattered. The attorney advised patience. Evidence is most powerful when it arrives unexpectedly, he said. Especially when the other side assumes you have nothing. I didn't argue. I prepared. The envelope wasn't dramatic. No bold labels. No threats. Just a quiet container for facts that refused to be ignored. While my sister rehearsed speeches and legal arguments, convinced she had reduced me to silence, I stayed exactly where she expected me to be. Compliant. Invisible. That illusion was her greatest mistake. Because when the time came to speak, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't explain myself emotionally. I wouldn't accuse. I would simply let the record speak. And once it did, there would be no way for her to take it back. She believed court was where she would finally assert control. She never considered it might be where she lost it. The shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in phone calls that ended a little too quickly. In messages that went unanswered. In conversations where my name was mentioned with discomfort, like an inconvenient topic people didn't want to touch. My sister was telling her version of the story. And it was working. Relatives who had once praised my reliability now spoke cautiously, as if I'd done something wrong by refusing to disappear quietly. They didn't accuse me directly. They didn't have to. Their words were wrapped in concern. "She's under a lot of pressure. She's a doctor now. Her reputation matters. Dragging this through court will only hurt the family." Hurt the family. As if the lawsuit itself hadn't already done that. One aunt suggested I settle privately. An uncle hinted that my sister deserved a clean start after all her hard work. Even my parents, tired, overwhelmed, desperate for peace, asked if I could reconsider. "You've always been the reasonable one," my mother said softly. Maybe you can let this go. Let it go. 7 years of sacrifice. Years of postponed plans. Years of being told later would come. And now I was being asked to erase myself for the sake of harmony. What stung most wasn't their disappointment. It was their certainty. They believed my sister because her story was simpler. She was the successful one. The doctor. The future. I was the background support, easier to dismiss than to acknowledge. My sister didn't contact me directly. She didn't need to. Her silence was strategic. It allowed others to pressure me on her behalf, to make me feel isolated without her having to say a word. At family gatherings, conversations stopped when I entered the room. Smiles felt strained. Support felt conditional. I could feel the expectation hovering around me like a quiet demand. Be quiet. Be kind. Be the one who absorbs the damage. For a moment, just a moment, I questioned myself. Was it selfish to fight? Was I clinging to pride instead of peace? Then I remembered the courtroom. The way she looked at me when she said my only job was to sacrifice. The ease with which she dismissed everything I'd done. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about erasure. So I stopped explaining myself. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I didn't try to win anyone back. I let them believe whatever made them comfortable. Because I knew something they didn't. Family opinion isn't what decides the truth. Evidence does. And when the time came, when the courtroom doors closed and only facts mattered, the voices that had turned against me wouldn't be the ones speaking. I would. And I would finally be heard. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and heavy, as if the sky itself understood the weight of what was about to happen. I arrived early. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished floors, a place where emotions were reduced to facts and stories were stripped down to what could be proven. I sat quietly on a wooden bench, hands folded, breathing evenly, reminding myself that calm was not weakness. Across the room, my sister entered with her lawyer. She looked composed, confident, every step measured. Her suit was sharper than mine, her posture deliberate, as if she were already practicing how victory would look on her. She didn't acknowledge me. Not a glance. Not a nod. Nothing. It was as if I no longer existed. When we were called inside, the courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Intimate. Unforgiving. The judge sat above us, expression neutral, eyes alert. This wasn't a place for performances. My sister's lawyer spoke first. He was smooth, rehearsed, persuasive. He framed her as a young professional burdened by unfair circumstances. A granddaughter who had sacrificed everything to achieve excellence. A woman now being denied her rightful inheritance by someone who had simply helped. Each word was chosen carefully. He spoke of generosity, of voluntary support, of family kindness twisted into leverage. My sister watched the judge closely, nodding at the right moments, her confidence steady. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. I felt dozens of eyes settle on me, some curious, some skeptical, some already decided. I didn't rush. I didn't defend myself emotionally. I didn't argue her story point by point. I simply stated my name. Then I said something my sister hadn't expected. I don't dispute that I helped my sister, I said calmly. I dispute that it was without understanding, expectation, or acknowledgement. Her lawyer smirked slightly as if this was already over. I didn't look at him. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, I continued, before I explain further, I'd like to submit supporting documentation. The judge nodded. Proceed. I reached into my bag. The envelope felt heavier than it had that morning. As I placed it on the desk, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. My sister leaned forward, her brow furrowing slightly. Her confidence wavered, just enough for me to notice. The judge opened the envelope slowly, scanning the first page. Then the second. Then the third. Silence filled the room. No objections. No interruptions. Just the sound of paper turning. My sister shifted in her seat. For the first time since this began, she wasn't in control of the narrative. And as the judge continued reading, I realized something important. This wasn't about proving her wrong anymore. It was about finally telling the truth without apology. And letting the consequences unfold exactly as they were meant to. The judge didn't react immediately. She read in silence, her eyes moving steadily across the pages as if she were piecing together a puzzle that suddenly made sense. The room felt suspended in time. No one spoke. No one dared. My sister sat perfectly still, but I could see it. The tension creeping into her shoulders, the slight tightening of her jaw. Confidence, once so effortless, now required effort to maintain. The first document was simple. Bank statements. Highlighted transfers. Semester after semester. Large sums, consistent dates, clear patterns. Not random gifts. Not occasional help. Structured support. Then came the invoices. Tuition bills addressed to her name, paid from my account. Housing contracts. Exam fees. Receipts for mandatory equipment. Each one labeled, organized, undeniable. The judge paused, flipped a page. Next were the messages. Printed text conversations, timestamps intact. I can't do this without you. Once I'm done, I'll make this right. Just one more year, then I'll stand on my own. My sister's words. Not mine. I watched her eyes flicker toward the pages, then away. She swallowed hard. The judge looked up for the first time. These messages, she said evenly, suggest reliance and expectation. My sister's lawyer shifted in his chair. The judge continued reading. Emails followed. Longer. More thoughtful. One in particular lingered longer in her hands. My grandfather's email. A quiet thank you. A recognition of effort. A statement of fairness written without drama or manipulation. Just truth. I trust you to do what's right, he had written. You always have. The judge set the papers down slowly. The silence was different now. Heavier. My sister leaned toward her lawyer, whispering urgently. He shook his head once, subtly, the way someone does when they realize an argument has already collapsed. Your Honor, her lawyer began, forcing a smile. These documents don't constitute a binding agreement. The judge raised her hand. I'm not evaluating this as a contract, she said. I'm evaluating credibility. She turned her gaze to my sister. You stated under filing that you received no meaningful financial support. My sister hesitated. I meant there was no obligation, she said quickly. They chose to help. The judge nodded slowly. Choice does not negate contribution, she replied. Nor does it erase reliance. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph. Relief. Because the truth, quiet, patient, methodical, was finally being heard. My sister's case hadn't fallen apart in a dramatic explosion. It was unraveling calmly. Logically. Page by page. And as the judge returned her attention to the documents, I understood something my sister never had. You don't win by rewriting reality. You win by letting it speak for itself. The judge leaned back in her chair, folding her hands together as if she needed a moment to let the room catch up. Her eyes moved from the documents to my sister, then to me, sharp and measured. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was assessment. I've reviewed the submissions, she said calmly. And I want to be very clear. My sister straightened, fingers gripping the edge of the table. This court does not look favorably on attempts to selectively redefine reality, the judge continued. Especially when those attempts contradict documented evidence. The words landed with weight. She turned toward my sister's lawyer. Your client claims the support she received was insignificant and voluntary. However, the financial records show consistent, structured contributions spanning multiple years. That is not incidental assistance. My sister shook her head slightly as if disbelief alone could change what was happening. The judge continued. Furthermore, the communications provided demonstrate reliance. Repeated reliance. Statements acknowledging both dependency and future expectation. Expectation. The very word my sister had insisted never existed. This court also takes into account the intent of the decedent, the judge added, lifting my grandfather's email slightly. Fairness was explicitly stated. Not performance. Not perceived potential. Fairness. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the lights above us. I find no basis to support the claim of undue influence, the judge said firmly. Nor do I find sufficient grounds to contest the will. My sister's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it again. The judge wasn't finished. In fact, she said, I find this action to be unnecessary and ill-advised. The estate will be distributed as written. Just like that. Years of sacrifice. Months of pressure. Weeks of legal maneuvering. Resolved in a single sentence. My sister's face drained of color. The confidence she'd worn like armor finally cracked, replaced by something raw and unsteady. She looked at me then, not with anger but confusion, as if she couldn't understand how this had happened. The judge met her gaze. "Success does not erase obligation," she said. "And family support does not become invisible once it's no longer convenient." I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in months. This wasn't victory in the way people imagine it. Loud, dramatic, triumphant. It was quieter than that. It was acknowledgement. The judge closed the file. "The court is adjourned." As we stood, the sound of the gavel echoed softly through the room, sealing something far deeper than a legal decision. It sealed the truth. And for the first time since my sister decided to take me to court, I didn't feel like I was standing alone. I felt seen. The hallway outside the courtroom felt brighter than the room we had just left, as if the air itself had shifted. People moved past us. Lawyers checking phones, clerks calling names, strangers absorbed in battles of their own. Life continued, indifferent to the collapse that had just occurred. My sister stood frozen near the wall. Her lawyer spoke to her in a low voice, words clipped and urgent, but she barely seemed to hear him. When he finally walked away, she turned toward me slowly, as if approaching something unfamiliar. "You planned this," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was disbelief. I shook my head. "I prepared," I replied. "There's a difference." Her composure was gone now. The carefully built image, the confident doctor, the unquestioned favorite, had fractured. She looked smaller. Unsteady. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "We could have talked." I studied her face, searching for something, remorse maybe, understanding. Anything that suggested she saw me now as more than an obstacle. "We did talk," I said quietly. "You just didn't listen." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You embarrassed me in there." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "You embarrassed yourself," I replied. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true." Her jaw tightened. "You could have let it go." That sentence again. I met her eyes. "And you could have remembered who helped you get here." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she looked away. "I needed everything to go my way," she said finally. "I worked too hard to lose." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just justification. I realized then that the court hadn't changed her. It had simply exposed her. "I hope you do well," I said, surprising both of us. "I truly do." She looked back at me confused. "After this?" "Yes," I answered. "Because I don't need to lose for you to succeed. I just won't disappear anymore." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me as if wanting to say something else, something that might soften the moment. But she didn't. She turned and walked away down the hallway, heels echoing sharply against the floor. I stood there for a moment, watching her retreating figure, not with anger but with clarity. This wasn't the end of our relationship. It was the end of an illusion. The illusion that sacrifice guarantees loyalty. The illusion that love is proven by silence. As I stepped outside into the open air, the weight I'd been carrying for years finally lifted. Not because I had won in court, but because I had finally stood where I belonged. In my own place. Unapologetic. The days after the hearing were quieter than I expected. No celebrations. No dramatic phone calls. Just a steady return to routine. Only this time the routine belonged entirely to me. For the first time in years I wasn't calculating how much I could spare. I wasn't bracing for the next emergency call or unexpected expense. The inheritance didn't make me wealthy, but it gave me something far more valuable. Breathing room. I paid off the debts I had accumulated quietly over the years. The loans I took so my sister wouldn't have to, the credit balances that had lingered longer than they should have. Each payment felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. Then I did something I'd postponed for nearly a decade. I asked myself what I wanted. Not what was practical. Not what made sense for the family. What I actually wanted. The answer surprised me with its simplicity. I wanted to build something of my own. I enrolled in a professional program I'd once dismissed as unrealistic. I invested in upgrading my skills not because I needed to prove anything but because I finally had the freedom to grow without guilt. The work was challenging, energizing. Mine. People around me noticed the change before I did. "You seem lighter," a colleague said one afternoon. "You sound different," a friend remarked during a call. They were right. I was no longer shrinking to accommodate someone else's ambition. I was expanding into my own. My sister didn't reach out. Neither did most of the relatives who had pressured me to let it go. Their silence no longer hurt. It clarified. Some connections exist only as long as you're useful. And that was okay. I redecorated my apartment slowly, deliberately. Not lavishly, intentionally. Each change felt symbolic. Space reclaimed. Identity restored. There were moments of grief, of course. You don't lose a relationship, even a fractured one, without mourning it. I missed the version of my sister I thought I had. I missed the future I believed we were building together. But I didn't miss the exhaustion. I didn't miss the quiet resentment. And I didn't miss the version of myself that believed love meant erasing my own needs. Rebuilding isn't dramatic. It's subtle, incremental, honest. It's waking up one day and realizing you're no longer waiting for permission. The court decision closed a legal chapter. But what followed was far more important. I wasn't just reclaiming money or recognition. I was reclaiming authorship over my own life. And this time every step forward belonged to me. For a long time I believed sacrifice was the purest form of love. I believed that if I gave enough, time, money, patience, everything would eventually balance out. That loyalty would be remembered. That effort would be honored simply because it was sincere. I was wrong. What I learned through all of this is something no one warns you about when you're the dependable one. Sacrifice without boundaries doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. My sister didn't wake up one day and decide to betray me. That version of her was built slowly, over years of being protected from consequences, years of being told her dreams mattered more than everyone else's limits. And I helped create that imbalance by never speaking up. That's a difficult truth to face, but an important one. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop abandoning yourself for them. It means recognizing when generosity has turned into entitlement and deciding that your worth isn't measured by how much you're willing to give away. The courtroom didn't change my life because I won. It changed my life because I finally told the truth, out loud, without apology. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't ask for sympathy. I simply refused to be erased. If there's one lesson I carry forward, it's this. Support should never require self-destruction. Family should never demand silence. And love should never be conditional on your willingness to disappear. I still believe in helping others. I still believe in kindness. But I now understand that the strongest form of generosity is the kind that doesn't cost you your identity. The person who walked into that courtroom was tired, diminished, and quietly afraid of being seen as selfish. The person who walked out knew something different. I wasn't wrong to help. I was wrong to believe I had to disappear to be worthy of love. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment or revenge. Sometimes it's about finally choosing yourself. And once you do, everything else falls into place.